Hey everyone, it's Rich Baldwin. Today we're going to talk a little bit about how the NAR settlement affects you here in the state of Utah if you're a home buyer or home seller. So let's just assume that you are a buyer trying to buy a property. Let's go back to how things were. The way things were was you would select an agent to help you find a property. Sometimes you would sign a contract with them, and sometimes you wouldn't. Sometimes they just show you a bunch of properties, and in the end, you kind of expected the listing agent or the seller to pay your agent or the buyer's agent the commission, right? Whatever that happened to be. It could be 2%, could be 4%, could be whatever. But whatever that was, they typically agreed to pay it, and usually the agents were pretty happy with that. That has changed. How this works today is when you procure an agent, you need to be very careful that you select an agent you want to be with, because you are now entering into a contract with that agent. And what that means is you negotiate from the very beginning how much you're going to pay them. So if you want to pay them $1,000 to show you around, good luck with that, by the way. They could agree to do that. If you decide to pay them 3% or 2.5% or whatever that happens to be, maybe you're just paying them a flat fee of $5,000, it doesn't matter. You make that agreement up front what you're going to pay. Let's say you run out with your agent, you've settled everything up, and you've agreed to pay them a 3% commission on whatever property you choose to purchase, right? So they find you a property, you go out, you're happy with it, you write the contract up, and in the negotiation of the sale of the property, the seller says, hey, look, we're not going to pay your 3% to your agent. We're only going to pay 2%. So what does that mean for you? That means that you've got to cough up the other 1%. So it's a little trickier today. Now, you could go back and negotiate that out with your agent and say, hey, look, they're only going to pay 2%. Are you willing to do that? You could renegotiate your contract with them. And you know what? Some agents are pretty good about that. And they'll be like, hey, look, that's fine. Let's figure this out. Let's get the deal done, because they'd like to get the deal done. But they might come back and say, hey, look, no, I've been out taking to 40 homes. I've done a lot of work. I really feel like that I've done enough work to expect that 3% commission. And so they may ask you to do that. That's the contract you signed. So that's the big difference, right? Now, if you want to, you could choose not to buy that home and you could get a different agent and try to do that. But when you're a seller, you're going to select your agent very similarly like you have had in the past. And you can negotiate how you want to pay that commission. If you want to pay them 2% and then pay another agent 2%, or you could say, hey, look, I really just feel like I only want to pay you your 3% or your 2% or whatever we've negotiated on, and I don't really want to pay anything to the buyer's agent. So if we're in a hot market where homes are just flying off the shelves, you might be able to get away with that. But if you're in a standard market, I really feel like, and this is my personal feeling on this, that there is going to be some expectation from the buyer that you will help compensate their agent, okay? You don't have to do it, right? I just want to make sure I'm very clear of that. You can say, look, I'm only going to pay them $1,000. You can negotiate that, right? So that's how it's going to affect you. Now, there are other things about this law that's going to affect agents and how they're able to market the property and how they're able to put information out there. For one example, is that in the past, they used to go in and put on the MLS how much they were willing to pay a buyer's agent, right? So if I was listing a property, and this happened to me recently, I was listing a property and we were going to pay the buyer's agent 2.5%. So we listed on the MLS, right? Now, that was fine to put on the MLS before. We can't do that anymore. So we can list it in a private place outside of the MLS, but it's no longer listed that way. And so that's difficult in some ways, because that's an attraction sometimes to a buyer's agent to bring somebody to your property, right? So when they go out there, they don't see that anymore. There's always that concern. So if I'm a buyer's agent now and I'm sitting on the outside, I have to call that agent up, or maybe they have that information on a separate site. I have to look it up to find out how much they're willing to pay me before I maybe take someone to that house. And I might have to go back to my buyer and say, look, I'd love to show you this property, but my fee, the fee that we negotiated was 3% or 3.5% or 2% or $1,000 or whatever it is, but they're only willing to pay this much. You have to agree to pay me an extra amount of money if we're going to see that property. They may decide, hey, look, I don't want to look at that property if they don't agree to pay you. Hopefully that makes sense to you. And if it doesn't, I'm happy to hop on a call with you. You can find all my information in the description below.